a returning truth teller, Jeff Stotts of InStreetClothes.com. He's got his third eye open.
Third time on the show, third eye open.
It's a huge story. Injuries, player health, all of it. Jeff Stotts, also
the angel of death. Jeff Stotts comes on to talk about bad news every single time.
I had that thought as soon as Cat got hurt last night. Tom and I had talked, and then of course all the stuff comes out with Towns going down. So the harbinger of doom is here.
Let's get into that. Let's start there. The Karl-Anthony Towns, it looked pretty brutal. The hashtag brutal. Anytime anyone gets injured, the only way to describe the situation is hashtag brutal. Karl-Anthony Towns is turning back and running back on, was it defense, offense?
He was running back on defense.
That's right.
Yep.
Running back on defense. Looks back at his lower leg and then just collapses to the ground and grabs his upper calf. And then just stays there and has to be helped off of the floor, not putting any weight on that leg. Initially, of course, everyone goes to, oh, that looks like an Achilles because of the reaction where he's looking back as if someone just clubbed him across the leg. However, one thing that was different to me was that he was looking and grabbing at the upper calf rather than the lower calf. And I think you can correct me because you're way smarter and more knowledgeable on these things. And that's why you're a truth teller and I'm not. That's more emblematic if he grabs the ankle area, more emblematic of a typical Achilles tear, but he's grabbing the upper leg. Did that stand out to you too?
Yeah. So I'm right with you. When I watched the video, because I wasn't watching that game live, but it started coming across my feed and everyone, starts tagging me. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? You nailed it on the head with the look back. That's one of the first things we look at is, does the person think they got kicked or attacked by a bat or whatever the case may be? Because that's what a lot of times guys say, that they thought someone kicked them or that something had happened from behind them. They look back and look confused because they don't understand what happened. And so I saw that and I was like, uh-oh. And then he does grab higher. So the big thing there is the calf is actually a muscle complex. So it's made up of multiple muscles, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. And we've actually learned a little bit more about this calf in NBA terms because of Damian Lillard's injury earlier in the year. He's currently sidelined with a soleus strain, so that specific muscle of the calf. But those two muscles have that conjoined tendon of the Achilles, and that's what attaches to the heel. And so when that tendon ruptures, you lose the ability to point your toes to plantar flex. And Cat grabbed higher. He grabbed the muscle belly, so like the thick, meaty part of his calf. So that kind of had me thinking, okay, potentially calf. I think online I likened it to when Luka got hurt last year, right before the postseason, because he kind of did the same thing. He was accelerating, playing it back, and kind of looked around and then started grabbing kind of that meaty calf area. And again, we know Luka missed the end of the regular season and into the postseason. So the big thing now is, after the Timberwolves have come out and said it is a calf strain, that does suggest that it's likely the muscle belly. Now, I still think there's some testing they need to do to make sure that it's not the Achilles. There are a couple things the athletic trainers have probably already done. And if that Achilles was completely torn, they would know. And there's a special test where you squeeze the calf and it moves the foot. And if it doesn't move, the Achilles is ruptured. And so a lot of times in those cases, MRIs are just confirming what we already know. But the MRI that is likely going to be performed today will tell us the extent of that strain and where that strain actually is. If it's in the muscle belly, that's probably a best case scenario because those injuries tend to heal a little bit quicker because they're highly vascularized, good blood flow to that area. So they tend to heal a little bit smoother than the tendons, or even what we call that musculotendinous junction where we're starting to merge into that tendon.
What causes these types of injuries? Is it wear and tear? Is it a lack of flexibility and pushing the muscle past its point, or what is the cause?
It's probably a little bit of all three. If the muscle is weakened from overuse, it can be more vulnerable to rupturing. And you just plant and you put that tendon on stretch, right? And it simply past, it can no longer function like it needs to. The tissues of the body have what we call yield points. And once they pass their yield point, they deform or tear or fail. And so it can be something simple like an excessive force isolated instance where all of a sudden that tendon just can't withstand the force. I've seen it happen. I've seen a guy tear his Achilles literally just walking across the weight room. Like he put the weights down and just stepped funny and generated enough force. And it
sounds like that's how I would blow my Achilles. 100%.
But our guy
minus
Trey,
weights.
Trey was walking across his classroom and tore his meniscus.
No, he didn't walk. He was standing at the blackboard or whiteboard, and he turned around and he tore his meniscus.
Fast. Too much.
Nice pivot on that meniscus. That'll fail for you. So with the calf, it's kind of the same thing, right? Now we have seen where if there is some degeneration from overuse, you're going to be more likely. It's going to be easier to tear that because it's just the tendon is not as strong as it needs to be. But again, I've seen people just kind of catch an unlucky break where they generate the appropriate amount of force at the right angle at that time, and it just fails.
So on your podcast with another truth teller, Brian Soderer, in Street Clothes, you reference the fact that there aren't that many high profile major injuries in the league, but there's certainly a lot of injuries and games lost due to injury. We know about Kawhi, we know about Damian Lillard with his calf injury, but what do the numbers say about the actual prevalence of injuries and how many games have been lost due to injury this year?
So we're entering the perfect point to have me on because we're hitting that first quarter mark with most teams finishing that first 20 games. And so as of last night, we were nearing 1,400 for the first quarter. So 1,400 games, which is about 250 games more than we were at the same point last season.
Whoa. Now,
those numbers seem high, but the rates are not maybe significantly different. But even if you raise the rates by just half a game, one extra half game lost for every game played, that's going to bump it up about 250 to 300 total games, right? So because of the number of games we play in the NBA. So I would say probably not significantly higher at this point, but still higher, which is concerning, especially this is the point of the season last year where things really turned. And part of that was COVID. I mean, COVID was a huge part of the numbers being so astronomically high last year. In the second, from games 20 to games 41, we lost over 500 games lost to COVID and COVID protocols last year. I mean, so huge spike right at this point last year. So I'm interested to see how many more illness games do we see? Do we see these flu? We know there's a flu bug going around that a lot of people are getting in the NBA. Now we used to call it that flu watch.
Especially in Miami. Yep. Lots of flu in Miami. Yep.
But now it's non-COVID illness, right? Like we don't even necessarily know exactly what's going on. We just get the non-COVID illness. So I'm keeping an eye on that because I think we are going to potentially come under last year's numbers based on the fact that the COVID numbers were so incredibly high last year. But that doesn't mean the numbers won't still be elevated, especially if I filter that kind of stuff out. And that's right. That's where we're getting. And again, I think this is a situation that is going to be obviously monitoring throughout the year, but the early signs indicate we could be in for another high year in terms of injuries.